Entering the veil. Entering the veil. It's the bread of adversity. We made the whole. What do you do when you realize the world's so cold? There's a path called righteousness, but it's littered with snares. Approach with caution, a weak feel. It's God's hands to break. Falling away, got us going astray. We in the valley of decision. Help us find our way. When people destroyed for lack of knowledge. How can that be? Mama spent 30 grand on college. The inner man in us seeks for greatness, but truth is like a gem hidden in the field. It's evasive. Who will prevail to open up the book? Who will excel into the veil and take a look? To those that have an ear, let them hear. Blindness and part is happening to us, but clear vision is near, man. We are entering the veil. Take hold, we are entering the veil.
Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Entering the Veil. The veil represents the separation between the holy and the most holy. Although the veil was torn in two, a separation still exists to this day due to our falling away from the sound doctrine originally delivered unto us via the Holy Bible. What this means is there is now a spiritual veil over the eyes and ears of the general public, causing a separation where none should exist. We are committed to helping guide as many people as possible along the spiritual path of entering the veil.
Shalom. My name is Is An Israelite, and I'm the priest of the United Congregation of Israel, and I would like to thank you for tuning in to Entering the Veil. The topic of discussion today is, what is an Israelite? Now, people often ask us, what is our religion? And when we reply to them that we are an Israelite, the most common question we get is, what is that? Most people have been told that the Old Testament is done away with and has no relevance today. But the irony is, you can find the term or the definition for an Israelite, you can find that in the New Testament. Most people, of course, have adopted this term of Christian. And when we look at these things, we have to see what the book says about this. The word Christian is used twice in the entire Bible, while the word Christians with an S is used only once. And all of these occurrences occur in the New Testament. The term Christianity is not listed in the Bible at all. The term Israelite, however, is listed 4 times. 2 listings are in the Old Testament and 2 listings are in the New Testament. The term Israelites with an S is listed 18 times in the Bible and is found in the Old and New Testaments. The term Israelite, of course, comes from the word Israel, which is listed in the Bible 2,576 times. So with all of this before us, it really is the Israelite who should be asking the Christian, what exactly is a Christian? What we have to do in examining these things, we have to understand that, as it is stated in the book, they were first called Christians in Antioch. And Antioch is in Syria, and we can find that in the book of Acts. But we have to understand the ways of the heathen. The first step that the heathen makes is to change the name. The next step after that is the changing of the culture. All we have to do is deal with the name changes that we have had to undergo here in this land. When you talk about how Kunta Kinte was brought here, the push was made for him to change that name to Toby. And what was it? It was a Christian name. That then changed the whole fabric of who he was. So the very thing that has happened to us as a whole, the same thing was given unto us with the Messiah as well. When the Bible was first printed in English, the 1611 edition of the Bible, there was no J at all in the English language. So the Bible at that time listed the Messiah's name as Jesus, which of course glorified the pagan god Zeus. And as that J developed around 1630, his name then was then called Jesus, or later Jesus. So we have to understand that when that name was changed, there was also a change of the doctrine as well. I'm going to read something to you guys in Romans chapter 9. And I'm going to start this at verse 1 so that we can get a clear understanding of what an Israelite is from the New Testament. And remember, this is the part of the book that most people say they believe in. Romans 9 and verse 1. I say the truth in Christ. I lie not. My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Ghost, that I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. So according to the flesh, they are from the same stock. Okay? Verse 4, who are Israelites? So back up. I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren. Understand, they were all brethren and they were all Israelites. So all of the apostles were Israelites. The disciples were Israelites. Now, as they went, of course, and spread that word to the Gentiles, then they were proselytes. But understand that who taught them were all Israelites. Verse 4, who are Israelites? Now, it's going to tell you what was given unto those Israelites. Because we have a lot of teachers today, and we see a lot of televangelists teaching a lot of things. But let's see what the Bible says about who is authorized to do these teachings. Verse 4, who are Israelites? To whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants. And we know that Yahweh is a covenant Elohim, and the giving of the law. But most people have said that the law is nailed to the cross. And the service of Elohim. Yahweh wants service. He wants servants. But what we hear most of the time is praise and worship. Praise and worship is what it says. It's praise and worship. But it doesn't mean that you serve the creator of all things. There's a difference between a worshiper and a servant. And the promises. Verse 5. Whose are the fathers, and of whom as concerning the flesh Christ came. So Christ himself was an Israelite. And if he is our example, why would we want to be anything other than what Christ was? Who is over all. And as it is stated, Christ is over the church. He is over all of us. So the one that is over all of us is an Israelite. The one that baptized the one that was over us was an Israelite. The ones that he taught, his disciples, were Israelites. Okay? And it says, who is over all, Elohim, blessed forever. Amen. So now let's go into some of those things that it says they were given. So Romans 9 verse 4, you keep that verse in your brain because we are going to go through a lot of things that will explain what that verse means. A lot of times we hear a lot of people cherry pick scriptures and they'll only read certain little parts, but we're going to break down what all of this means in Romans 9 verse 4. So if you're not sure what an Israelite is, if you don't remember anything else from this broadcast, remember Romans 9 verse 4. Okay, we're going to go to Numbers so that we can get a clear understanding of what's going on here. Numbers chapter 3, and we're going to read in verses 11 through 13. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, And I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall be mine, because all the firstborn are mine. For on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall they be. I am Yahweh. So the children of Israel belong to Yahweh. So we have to consider that when people talk about the blessings and all of these things that Israel has, Israel belongs to Yahweh. Let's go to Exodus chapter 4 and I'm going to read verses 21 through 26. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 21, and it says, "And Yahweh said unto Moshe, when you go up to return into Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh which I have put in your hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And you shall say unto Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn." Now, he's saying Israel is my son and my firstborn, but at the same time, Israel is in captivity. This is what confuses people today. If this so-called African-American truly is an Hebrew Israelite, and they are the blessed people of Yahweh, then why are they suffering such persecution? We read it in the beginning of the book, and we will read the same thing at the end of the book. Yahweh expects more out of those that are his. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 23. "And I say unto you, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay your son, even your firstborn." And it came to pass by the way in the end that Yahweh met him and sought to kill him. So what we see here in dealing with these things is that Yahweh says, this is my son, and let my son go that he may serve me. Now, the very next verse is a little confusing to people, and it says, and he met him by the end and sought to kill him. Well, because even though he had given him a great charge and given him these great miracles to do, he also had to get his house in order, and he had not gotten his son circumcised, and the angel of Yahweh was going to make sure that all of those things were put in place. Now, that was covering the adoption. Now, oftentimes, people are used to having an entire sermon preached off of one verse. This entire broadcast is based off of Romans 9 and verse 4, and we're going through each step. This is the next step. We just did the adoption. Now, this is the glory. Let's go to Numbers chapter 7, and we're going to go in verse 89, and we're going to read that to chapter 8 and verse 4. Number 7 and verse 89. "And when Moshe was gone into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with him, then he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from off the mercy seat that was upon the ark of testimony. From between the two cherubims he spake unto him. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto Aaron, and say unto him, When you lighteth the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light over against the candlestick." There is not a coincidence that we have this 7 golden candlestick sticks here behind us. When you read in Isaiah 11, a lot of times you hear people saying that they caught the spirit. Well, you should ask those people, which spirit did you catch? Because when it talks about Christ in Isaiah 11 verses 1 and 2, it talks about that he had the 7 spirits, thus 7 golden candlesticks. There is an order to the setup that Yahweh has put in place. Numbers 8 and verse 3. "And Aaron did so. He lighted the lamps thereof over against the candlestick, as Yahweh commanded Moshe. And this work of the candlestick was of beaten gold. Unto the shaft thereof, unto the flowers thereof, was beaten work, according unto the pattern which Yahweh had showed Moshe. So he made the candlestick." He followed his instructions. And when you read this book, you'll also find that all of these things were given to Israel in order. And you find out that Israel is listed as Yahweh's witnesses. Even though we have other people that say that they are witnesses, Israel is the only one listed in this book as Yahweh's witnesses. So let's go to Isaiah 11 so that we can read these things about these spirits, so that we can understand a few things. Isaiah 11 and verse 1. And this is talking about Christ. "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. We're talking about of the seed of David. And the spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. The spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the spirit of counsel, the spirit of might, the spirit of knowledge, and the spirit of fear of Yahweh. 7 spirits. You see the setup? Yahweh has built this from ground up, and no one has authority to change these things. We know that the Sabbath is the 7th day. It is the first thing that Yahweh blessed and sanctified, and it was the first things the Christians changed. When Constantine ordered Christianity to be the legal religion of his so-called holy empire, they changed the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday. And thus people still keep that lie today. Verse 3, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of Yahweh. See, it's the fear of Yahweh that causes you to obey the word. So a lot of people say they have the spirit, but they don't have the spirit of fear, because if they had the spirit of fear, they wouldn't keep showing up on Sunday. They would say, I am motivated to keep the Sabbath day because the spirit of fear of my God, I respect him, I honor him, I love him, and that spirit of fear causes me to want to serve him in the correct manner. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness shall he judge the poor and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. Because there is power, absolute power in the words that proceed out of Christ's mouth. We're going to go into Psalms chapter 78. I want to read because now we're dealing with this glory. Okay, now, and we find out that this glory has only been placed upon Israel thus far. So we see the setup of things. So Psalms 78, verse 59, and it says, when Elohim heard this, he was wroth and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity. So Israel is his strength. You see how Yahweh is very particular when it comes to Israel, how they belong to him, how they are his strength. So consider those things. His strength, this is his glory. This is Israel. They are his people, of which people we are, but we have no idea. So we have covered the adoption, the glory, and now we're going to go into the covenants. Let's go to Genesis chapter 15, and we're going to read verses 13 through 18. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them. Does that sound familiar? And shall afflict them 400 years. Now, most people will tell you that this is, that was the Egyptian captivity. But he said 400 years. When you read about the Egyptian captivity, you'll find that he says, I brought Israel out 430 years to the self same day. So why would he be so accurate to the very self same day, but then be 30 years off? Does that even sound like the creator of all things, that he would make a mistake, a 30-year mistake, but then still be exact to the self same day? Right. Now consider how long our people have been here. And it says they shall afflict them 400 years, verse 14. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward shall they come out with great substance. And you shall go to your fathers in peace. Okay, now consider this. Also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. You have to watch all of the things that are taking place here in America, and we know that judgment is definitely coming toward America for the things that she has done and is currently doing as we speak. I'm going to read some another part to you in Exodus chapter 24, and I'm going to start this at verse 4. It says, "And Moshe wrote all the words of Yahweh, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel." You see this? The foundation is Israel. Yet you have people telling you that Israel has been cut off. "And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto Yahweh. And Moshe took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar." This even gets down to the sacrifice, that it had to be sealed in blood. This is why Christ had to be sacrificed. Why this blood had to be shed, because it is blood that makes the atonement for sin. Verse 15. "And Moshe went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the glory of Yahweh abode upon Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moshe out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of Yahweh was like devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel." So this is why you see when you read, it says, "Israel, you are my witnesses." Why? Because these things were only shown unto the children of Israel. Now we know that this book, when we deal with the covenants, we know that this entire story is based off of these 7 keys, these covenants. All of these covenants were made with the children of Israel. Now, we could read a lot more things in this Old Testament, but I'm going to read the covenants, a writing about the covenant in Hebrews chapter 8, because there's a lot of talk that a lot of things are done away with, and you don't have to deal with any of these things, but we're going to have to read something, and then we're going to see what thus says Yahweh. So you can then decide whether or not you want to listen to the Israelites who were given the authority to teach, or whether or not you're going to listen to your preacher. Hebrews chapter 8, and we're going to start that at verse 10. "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel." Remember now, we're reading from the New Testament. Okay? So he said is and will. This is future tense. "The covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a Elohim, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest." Now, you'll find that same writing in Jeremiah 31 and verse 31. It tells you the very same thing, that the new covenant, a lot of people say we're in the new covenant. The new covenant hasn't been enjoined. The new covenant says, I'm going to write my laws in their heart and their mind. But yet we are being taught that the law is nailed to the cross. But that does not coincide with what's written in this book. This is why I don't really agree with getting all of these new found Bibles with these new translations, because as they translate, they take things out and they word things so that they can give you the belief or the understanding that they want you to have. So I'm fine with the old style King James version. It does fine for me. All right. So now that's all that we're going to deal with the covenants. Now we're going to deal with the giving of the law. Now, if you've just tuned in, then I must, reiterate that all of these writings, all of these things that we're reading are based off Romans 9 and verse 4. All right. But to have a clear understanding of that, you need to be able to break down all of those things and see what they mean. Deuteronomy. Now we're going into the giving of the law. We're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I'm going to start that at verse 1. Now therefore, hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that you may live, and go in and possess the land, which Yahweh your Elohim, your fathers, give you. So before we were allowed to go into this land, he wanted us to understand our conduct before we went in it. Now, does it make a little bit more sense that we are now captives in somebody else's land? So understand, we must understand these things, or we will not be able to have a land of our own. We will not be able to inhabit the land that Yahweh has for us until we understand all of these things. You have all these forums where people saying, what's wrong with the black community? This is wrong with the black community. The laws of Yahweh, the laws that people teach us on Sunday morning are done away with. This is why we're captives in somebody else's land. This is why somebody has to allow us the right to vote. This is why we have to riot and picket and sign petitions to get a fair trial for a young black man buying Skittles and sweet tea. And his life can be taken from him, and nothing is done to the person that did it. This is why we have to fight for justice. Why? Because we didn't do the things that we're supposed to do. Now, you can go to all these forums and talk about how we need to do this and we need to do that. This is what we need to do. And until we do these things, we are not going to stand as a people. Verse 2, you shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, which I command you. And we know that things have been taken out of this book, saying the law is nailed to the cross. What you find, remember what Christ said to the Pharisees. He said, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you tithe, but you omit the weightier matters of the law. Now, if the law was going to be nailed to the cross, why didn't he say you didn't have to deal with any other matters of the law? Now, ask yourself, what is preached on Sunday morning? The only law that people know of is the law of tithing. They don't know anything else about any other law, right? So who then is teaching? Scribes and Pharisees. Verse 3, your eyes have seen what Yahweh did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that followed Baal Peor, Yahweh your Elohim have destroyed them from among you. But you that did cleave unto Yahweh your Elohim are alive, every one of you, this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. So we have our instructions, the giving of the law. These things were given unto Moshe, which was then given unto the children of Israel, which was then given unto the Euro-Gentiles, because it was the Israelites that taught them. Now, there is a difference between what the Jew has to do and what the Euro-Gentile has to do. The Euro-Gentiles did not have to do all of the things that were given unto Israel, but they still had to keep the order. And the Sabbath had absolutely nothing to do with that, those things that they did not have to do. That was definitely one of those things. Matter of fact, if you read in the book of Acts, you'll find out that the Gentiles learned on the Sabbath day. Let's go to Romans, saying that, let's go into Romans chapter 3. And in Romans chapter 3, we're going to read something just so we can reiterate the setup the giving of the law. Romans chapter 3, and I'm going to start this at verse 1. What advantage then has the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision? Remember, the Gentiles did not have to do circumcision. Okay, that was one of the things that was not made mandatory to them, but it was made mandatory for Israel. Verse 2, much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of Elohim. So in other words, the children of Israel are the teachers. They can't be uncircumcised and teach. See, these are things we don't know anything about, because these things are cherry picked out of here when these things are read back to us by these major televangelists. Verse 3, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of Elohim without effect? Now you'll have some people say that all you have to do is have faith, but faith without works is dead. So says this book. Verse 4, Elohim forbid. Let Elohim be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that you might have be justified in your sayings and might have overcome when you are judged. And how can you be judged without law? You cannot have judgment without law. Verse 5, but if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of Elohim, what shall we say? Is Elohim unrighteous, who takes vengeance? I speak as a man. Elohim forbid, for then how shall Elohim judge the world? How can you have judgment without a righteous law? Okay, I'm going to read something else to you in Romans chapter 2. It says, Romans 2 and verse 9, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil, of the Jew first, and also of the Gentile. But glory, honor, and peace to every man that works good, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile. For there is no respect of persons with Elohim. Now you see that it says tribulation and anguish to the Jew first, and glory and honor to the Jew first. And then it says there's no respect of persons. This is not respect of persons. This is the rightful order of things. Okay? My battery goes in my car, and then there's my alternator in my car. One has to be there to start the car. The other one keeps the battery charged. I don't have any more love for my battery than I do for my alternator, but I need them both, and I need them in the order that they are needed in. And that's what you have to understand, the way that these things are set up. Now, verse 12, it says, for as many have sinned without law shall also perish without law. And as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. We have an old term that we would always say, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Okay? So what does that mean? I would rather be judged than to die. You have many people telling you that the law is nailed to the cross. Yet we're reading here in the New Testament, for those who have sinned without law, they're going to die without law. So they say the law is nailed to the cross. It's done away with. Well, sin, the definition of sin is the transgression of the law. So if there is still sin, there has to be law. Verse 13, for not the hearers of the law are just before Elohim, but the doers of the law shall be justified. Now understand, the portion of the law that was done away with is the animal sacrifice portion of the law, because that Christ fulfilled. What does that have to do with anything about thou shalt not lie, steal, covet thy neighbor's house, wife, or anything of that nature? That has absolutely nothing to do with that. That has to do with animal sacrifice, and he was the greatest sacrifice. So there cannot be a better sacrifice than Christ. Verse 14, for when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves. Yet, all of a sudden, we're being taught that the law is nailed unto the cross. That is not what he's teaching. Paul is an Israelite who set up all the churches among the Gentiles. Everything that was set up by him. He was the apostle that was sent directly to the Gentiles. Everything that is set up under him. So if your church or your organization goes against Paul, then there's something seriously wrong with your church organization, because this is the only Israelite who was given the authority to go to the Gentiles and teach. So now when we read the things that he taught, we find a great discrepancy between what he says and what's being said today. Verse 15, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, that their thoughts, the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. Now, we have a very important part that's going to be read right here. Romans 2 and verse 16 says, in the day when Elohim shall judge the secrets of men by Yeshua the Mashiach according to my gospel. Again, we deal with judgment. We have always heard that there's a judgment day. Yet, time and time again, we have watched, we've gone to funerals, and we've heard Christian preachers say that that person is up in heaven smiling down. How can that person have anything? There hasn't been a judgment day yet. It says that he's going to judge the secrets of men. So first they tell us the lie that the law is nailed to the cross. Then they tell us that everybody that dies goes automatically up into heaven. But when you read this book, the book says they're asleep. Because when we read Revelation, it says he's going to have to wake up the dead for judgment. So how can they already be in heaven? See? So there's lies being taught from behind the altar. But let every man be convinced in his own heart. But you cannot be convinced in your own heart if you don't read this for yourself. All right? So that was the covering of the giving of the law portion. Now we're going to go into the service of Elohim. And to understand this, we're going to go back into the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 12, and we are going to start this at verse 12. Exodus chapter 12, and we're starting at verse 12. It says, for I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Now consider this as we dwell in the daughter of Babylon called America, and we've been here for so many years. Understand that this is 430 years after they have been in Egypt. Okay? Now they were not captives and slaves that entire time, as the covenant said in Genesis we would be. So we know that that's not the one. And we know also that they walked into Egypt. They were not carried into Egypt. Verse 13. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not come upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So we're talking about the very first Passover. But the Christians took Passover away from us and gave us Egypt, to where instead of having a remembrance of Yahweh protecting his people, what we do is celebrate the God of fertility in the hiding of eggs, and then dressing up in all white suits, dressing our kids up to be the fertile agent for that egg and fertilizing that egg. That is what this Easter thing is about, because bunnies don't lay eggs. Verse 14, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to Yahweh throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. Exodus chapter 23 and verse 14. 3 times you shall keep a feast unto me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you, in the time appointed of the month Abib, which is, this corresponds to the time of the ending of March, beginning of April. Matter of fact, we celebrate a day called April Fools. What they did was make up a mockery of all of the people who followed the true biblical New Year. Abib, or April, what we call April Fool's Day, this was the time that the people who actually followed the Bible, this was their New Year. As this is also the Hebrew Israelite New Year. Our New Year is not January 1st. We must understand that the church teaches the worship of pagan gods. If you recall, every New Year's, there is a watch night service. Now, this watch night service, the people gather together and right around midnight, everybody turns to the back of the room and then they count down to New Year, and then they tell you to turn around and everybody starts screaming. Well, what the church teaches is a mock ritual in respect to the pagan god Janus. This is the god that January is named after. If you think about the football games that will always come on right around New Year's, there is a commercial that comes on, and it is called the Janus Mutual Fund. With the commercial of the Janus Mutual Fund, they will put up a 2-headed coin. They are letting the people know that they are worshiping the 2-headed god Janus. And the church does this ritual, and people believe that they're just keeping this, that they are watching out for the new year. But why do you think it's called watch night? The 2-headed God can watch in both directions, in the past and in the future. So think about why January was named after him. He can look into the old year, December 31st, that last day, and looks into the new year, January 1st. So he's the 2-headed God that looks this way and that way. And the church teaches us to worship these pagan gods, and we don't have any idea that that's what we're doing. But the leadership in the church does know that they're teaching us paganism. I'm going to read one more verse here in Exodus chapter 23 in verse 17. It says, 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before Yahweh your Elohim. Now, this was, of course, the law. Now, people say the law is nailed to the cross, right? Not understanding that that is dealing with sacrificial law. So we're going to jump to Zechariah chapter 14, and we are going to read something about Armageddon. Now, we know that Armageddon hasn't happened. So we know that this is a prophecy that has yet to be fulfilled. So we're talking about future here. All right. Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 1. It says, behold, the day of Yahweh cometh, and your spoil shall be divided in the midst of you. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravaged, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. Now, verse 3. Then shall Yahweh go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. Now it's going to go into the return of Christ. Verse 4. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. If you get into Acts, the apostles were talking, and the angels came and says, that same Yahshua who you have seen leave, he will come back in like manner. So it was already said, the angels were telling them that he's going to come back to the Mount of Olives. Zechariah says the same thing, but before Christ ever came. All right. Let's see, we're going to jump down to verse 6, just so we can reiterate how this is a future prophecy. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark. So we know that none of this has ever happened. Now we're going to jump down to verse 13. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from Yahweh shall be among them, And they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. So we know that there shall not be a peaceful time. We're talking about great war. Verse 14, and Judah shall also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, because all of the nations will come up to fight this battle, thinking that they're fighting against men, but they're going to be fighting against Christ. Verse 16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem. So this lets you know that it's going to be a lot of death, a lot of bloodshed in this battle of Armageddon, because it specifically says those that are left. So those that are not killed, okay? Everyone that is left of all the nations shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, he is making them keep the Feast of Tabernacles. If you go back to Exodus, those 3 times a year that all males have to make an appearance, this is one of them. So now he's making them come up to keep the feast. But yet we're taught the law is nailed to the cross. This is the second coming of Christ. Christ is going to have to make them come up and keep these holy feast days. Right. That means Christ is going to put back in order what all of these pastors have taken out of order. Remember, it was plagues added to whoever would take out or add anything unto what's written in this book. Verse 17, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. Now we're going to go into the promises. I want to read this in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 14. It says, turn, O backsliding children, says Yahweh, for I am married unto you, and I will take you, one of a city and 2 of a family, and I will bring you to Zion, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. See, the pastors that he's going to give you, they're going to be Israelites. The pastors that he gave to start this were Israelites. Saul was an Israelite. All of the apostles were Israelites. The disciples were Israelites. Christ was an Israelite. So when Yahweh says, I'm going to give you pastors of my heart, they're going to be Israelites. I'm going to read something else to you in the book of Romans, chapter 11. It says, I say then, has Elohim cast away his people? Elohim forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Wait a minute. So that's letting you know all the way down the line are Israelites. And the bulk of the New Testament was given by this brother. And he's saying that he's an Israelite. So if he's an Israelite, Christ is an Israelite. Everybody leading up to that family was an Israelite. Why would you want to be anything other than what they were? Verse 2, Elohim has not cast away his people. This is why people say you could not possibly be an Israelite, because you don't have the blessings and all of this money and all of these things. If that was the case, they wouldn't be asking this question, has he cast away his people? But it's going to explain that. Know you not what the scripture says of Elias, how he makes intercession to Elohim against Israel, saying, Yahweh, they have killed your prophets and dig down your altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. But what says the answer of Elohim unto him? I've reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. Then you have to look up Baal. Baal was called Lord. And this is why we were given this substitution of Lord instead of the name of the Almighty God, Yahweh, our Elohim. So that one word was given for not only the Creator's name, it was also given in a lower form for the name of Christ as well. So we have been given that name for us to use, or that title, because that is not a name. But listen to what it says here. It says, they have killed your prophets and digged down your altars. See, it is the priests, the man priests, that preside over these things. Now, as we do things today, we know that they have women in the pulpit. Now, if we just go back a couple of years, people want to say, well, this is a time of advancement and a time of doing all of these things. You will never advance out of Yahweh's ordination and setup. It is men that are set to be in the priesthood. There is not an authorized woman priest or preacher. They can teach women, but once there's a man in that congregation, they are out of order and shall be punished of Yahweh. So says this book. Remember what it says in Revelation. I have somewhat against you, because you've suffered that woman Jezebel to teach and seduce my servants. Verse 5, even so at this present time, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. And we know that there are when you deal with the remnant, you're dealing with a small amount of people who are truly love the Creator with their heart, body, their spirit, and they make the changes that they need to make based upon what they discover and what Yahweh allows them to understand out of this book. But what we like to do is just stay the same. So we know that people are not worshiping him in truth and in spirit, because we don't like to make changes. We want to stay the way that we are. Let's jump down to verse 11. It says, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Talking about Israel. Elohim forbid. But rather, through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. So our people are provoking to jealousy. They're provoked to jealousy because of what they see the Euro Gentiles possess. So the way we go after it is we try to go to the schools that they go to. We try to emulate the things that they do so that we can have what they have. But Yahweh caused them to have those things, and for us not to have those things, so that we would be jealous but not follow in their path. Be jealous and then get in our book and do what we're supposed to do. Verse 12. Now if the fall of them, the fall of Israel, be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. Now consider that. Ponder on that. I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles. He's the one taught to teach the Gentiles and give them order. Jump back to verse 1. Romans 11 and verse 1. It says, for I also am an Israelite. Right. So the one who was given to teach the Euro Gentiles was an Israelite. Why would you want to be anything else? Verse 14. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, Israelites, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. Do you understand that there's a holy day called first fruits? Do you understand that Christ was raised as the first fruits of men? Do you know these things? And why not? Because these things are not taught in the Christian organization. These things were not given to them to teach. These things were given to the Israelite, because to them was given the adoption, the promise, the covenants, the service of Elohim. And to have service, that means they are given the authority to teach. For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partakers of the root and fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if you boast, you beareth not the root, but the root you. And we know that they have boasted against the root because they changed what was set up. They were given the Sabbath day, they changed it. They were given holy days, they took those out, gave us holidays. We were given an order of within the priesthood. They took that away and gave us woman preachers. Right? So that is definitely boasting against the branches. Verse 19, you will say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. And you stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed, lest he also spare not you. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of Elohim. And this is what we don't want to deal with. We always want to mention the goodness of Elohim, but no one wants to deal with the severity of Elohim. On them which fell, severity, but toward you, goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise, you also shall be cut off. Verse 23, and they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in. For Elohim is able to graft them in again. Verse 24, for if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, natural Israel, be grafted in to their own olive tree? Verse 25, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And when you deal with these things, the fullness of the Gentiles is the time that the Euro Gentiles have been given to rule on this earth. And we find that given by the prophet Daniel. And that time is coming to a close, as it is time for righteous rulership to be placed here on earth, which is why Yahweh is raising up pastors according to his heart. Well, thank you for tuning in to Entering the Veil. My name is Is An Israel, and I would like to invite you to check out our website, theuci.org. And if you are keeping Sunday worship, we invite you to keep the Sabbath online with us so that you can learn what Christ taught, you can learn what those apostles taught, and you can do things in a way that it will be pleasing to the Creator of all things. Thank you. Shalom.